Hello and welcome everyone to Ananke's Festival of Literature. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Mai Al Nakib for this amazing, uh, which I know will be an amazing fireside chat. So, welcome, May.
Thank you so much, Sabine. I'm delighted to be here.
So, a little bit about May. May Al Nakib is author of the novel An Unlasting Home. Her award winning collections of short stories, The Hidden Light of Objects, will be reissued by Saki Books UK in June 2025. Her short stories, poems, and occasional essays have appeared in, among others, World Literature Today, Revayat, the blog of the LA Review of Books, After the Pause, the Marcus Review, and the BBC World Service. As associate professor, she taught English and comparative literature at Kuwait University for 20 years. Her research interests include cultural politics in the Middle East, especially Kuwait, feminism, post colonialism, cosmopolitanism, citizenship rights, and ethical practice. Her academic essays have appeared in numerous peer reviewed journals, including Deleuze Studies, Diaspora, Interventions, Science, and forthcoming in Angelarchy. She lives and writes in Kuwait. So, welcome, May.
Thank you so much, Sabine. Thanks for that. I'd like to read um, an excerpt from the title story of the collection, The Hidden Light of Objects. The Hidden Light of Objects is about a Kuwaiti woman, Zaina, abducted from Kuwait in 1991 in the crazy days just after the liberation of Kuwait from Iraq and held captive in Iraq for a decade. The stories narrated back and forth by Zaina and her eldest daughter Jinan, both trying to make sense of Zaina's 10-year absence and her sudden release. I'm going to begin at the beginning of the story, opening with Jinan's voice, then shifting to Zaina's. I'll pause a little bit between so that the transition is clear, but I think you'll be able to tell. And then after that, and I'll let you know, I'm going to move to a later part of the story where Zaina narrates her abduction, and then I'll continue reading until the conclusion. Again, there'll be a couple of shifts between the two voices, and I'll try to pause a bit, but I don't think it'll be too difficult to tell the difference between the two. So then, to begin. What strikes us is how serene our mother looks, stepping off the plane, the prime minister of our small country waiting to greet her. Nothing phases her, not the prime minister, not the string of parliamentarians angling for photo ops, not the frenzied media's nest, not even us. Everything seems to bleed together for Zaina. For us, everything feels sharp, outlined in black. We remark on the rarity of the clouds in the steel sky. We read them as a sign. We've spent 10 years reading signs. It's no surprise that on the day of her release, we lose ourselves in a flurry of them. Sparrows precariously balanced on instruments played by the army band, brought in for a special welcome. A sliver of obstinate moon at an hour when it long should have moved into someone else's night. Most striking of all, through the sulfuric fumes anyone living in an oil town like Kuwait is familiar with, whiffs of vanilla. They do not comment on my short white hair or papery skin. They fail to note my quick intakes of breath as I navigate the steps of the plane. They see a mask of calm, my practiced serenity. They cannot hear my irregular heartbeat or feel my brittle bones. I perceive little through the flash of bulbs, the microphones under my nose, the hands thrust into mine. Carefully, I embrace my daughters, 3 stunning women, almost strangers to me, and my husband, Kerim, his eyes, like mine, creased with age. I refuse to release my burlap sack, my sole acquisition in a decade. The smell of white cake surrounds me, and I wonder how they have managed it. So now I'm just going to skip again to where Zaina begins to speak about her abduction. We begin with Zaina's voice. The morning I was abducted, what I heard, what drew me to the front door, away from my coffee, was the strangled sound of a woman struggling for air. My instinct was not to warn my family, not to dive down into the basement. It should have been. I have my own tangled ropes of regret. My instinct was to go see. What I saw when I threw open the door was a young woman on her knees with a thick, clear plastic bag over her head. Her stricken eyes, jerking desperately in my direction, appeared strangely magnified. Two heavy-set men stood over her, pulling the rope around her neck in opposite directions. I hear the snap. They removed the bag. I couldn't take my eyes off her face. I didn't recognize her, but she was somebody's daughter. Before I could react or make a sound, the men swooped down on me, put the same plastic bag over my head. I could smell her saliva, her fear, and stuffed the dead girl and me into the trunk of what I'm certain was a stolen Mercedes. I was grateful for the roomy trunk. They hadn't bothered to tie up my hands or feet, so it was easy enough to pull the bag off my head and push the poor girl into the deepest part of the trunk. I kicked out one of the tail lights with my foot. In that first week after liberation, however, there wasn't anyone around to notice. There were people on the streets, all right, but they were too busy doing wrong, looting, exacting revenge on innocents, to pay any attention to me. The car flew through the desert. I don't know how the men managed to bypass undetected all those American troops, but they did, all the way to Baghdad. In the few seconds from when the car stopped to when they opened the trunk, I thought only of my three girls. I expected an immediate pistol to the head, and I was trying to blot out fear with images of my babies. They dragged me out of the trunk. My legs would not hold, so they propped me against a wall. They blindfolded me and tied my hands behind my back. I could hear them yelling to someone named Mohammed to come out for a pickup. They didn't say a word to me, and I kept as silent as cotton. I could hear them struggling to remove the girl's rigid body from the car. I anticipated a similar end for myself. Instead, I heard the car doors slam shut and the engine revving up, a squeal of tires, and they were gone. I expected Mohammed to bear down on me at any moment. He didn't. I could feel the warmth of the sun on my forehead, could almost see its orange glow through my closed and covered eyelids. My limbs ached. I tried as hard as I could to escape the binding unsuccessfully. Hours must have passed. I could feel it getting darker, the cold seeping into my bones. No sign of Mohammed. I fell into an irregular sleep, waking up confused, fingers reaching for Karim's hand the way they often did. And after 5 hours, maybe 10, someone pulled me up by the hair. Mohammed. He pushed me from behind, leading me somewhere. He must have spoken, but I remember nothing of what he said. He removed my blindfold and shoved me into a pitch-black hovel, nothing more than a hole in the ground with wood over the top, two small cracks for air. I must have fainted almost instantly because, again, I have no memory of that first time in the hole. All of us spent our first day in the hole, a kind of breaking in, but after that it was rare. When a guard was in a sadistic frenzy, he would shove one of us down in, but thankfully that didn't happen often. The hole smelled of river mud, and we had taught ourselves to close our eyes and imagine floating on a raft in blue waters, an endless course of aquamarine. It took discipline, but over time it worked, and the hole, like our cell, couldn't touch us. There weren't many guarding us, only 4 or 5, and as far as we could tell, we were the only prisoners in the building. It wasn't a conventional prison. We knew that all along, and when we were released, we weren't surprised to find that it was the basement of a quite ordinary villa in a suburb of Baghdad. The guards were all men. This caused exactly the kind of trouble you would expect, especially during the first few years, and especially for the lovely Khadija, who had 2 children to show for it. My daughters suspect I lied when I said nothing happened. It isn't shame that stops me from telling them. We aren't that kind of family, and am not that kind of woman. What stops me from telling them right away is something more complicated than shame or guilt or even regret. There is no going back. I should have realized this after the occupation, the so-called liberation. Nothing, not a thing, went back to the way it had been. New people in the country, new food, new habits, new language. Suddenly, women swathed in ominous black hoods. 1 year can blot out the past, everything that we were before. Twinkling water, pure desert, and life is channeled into a bucket of mud. No going back. The filth and dirt everywhere, the corruption, the sooted skies and murky seas. Nobody seemed to care, everyone swallowing fistfuls of dollars as fast as they could. We were suspended, watching it all through sand-blasted glass, thinking everything was different because she had been taken from us, making it personal. But it wasn't just her absence, this new and sadly rotting Kuwait. She would have known how to deal with it, we told ourselves, how to make life work despite the doomed tangle. We were, for 10 years, in a situation that was unheimlich. We no longer belonged. All we could do was look back and pine for what could never again exist. Our lives before were padded by her presence. There are people who know how to make life safe despite the deepest sorrows. With a matchbox and Kleenex, my mother would fashion baby ghost dolls in a tiny bed for us to play with. And when she and my father had some money, working like demons in their 20s, the early successes of our precious little boomtown, she spent it on travel, buying beautiful things, on her garden, her house, because she knew it could all disappear, that now was the time to enjoy it. The thing is to be light as air, she would say. Our lives before were as light as air. We were lucky, luck of the draw. The lucky are hated the world over, detested, and rightly so. The lucky make it worse for everyone else. But we have paid our dues. So has she, and she didn't deserve it. In the trunk of that still Mercedes, when I believed I would be dead in seconds, thoughts of my girls filled me. It felt like being lit from the inside, and the fear of death, though undeniably there, diminished. They go on, I go on. Once it became clear none of us was going to be killed, the small number of Kuwaiti POWs kept alive were apparently valuable bargaining chips in the endless negotiation for reduced sanctions or increased loans. I knew something had to change. I could not keep filling myself with their light, my children's or even my husband's, because it made me want to go home, heimlich. And as we came to realize, after that first year in captivity, there was no chance we were going home any time soon. It wasn't that I stopped thinking about them completely. That would have been impossible. But what allowed me to create a new kind of home for myself out of the infuriating suspension we now inhabited, a limbo punctuated by the violence and disregard of men whose poverty and desperation could be seen in their bloodshot eyes and crusty yellow nails, was shifting focus from the life I knew to the objects I had once owned. Between my body and me, between the ones I loved and me, a cavalcade of possessions. I can't expect them to understand any of that yet. How the things that belong to me, fine lace pieces from Burano, clumps of silver jewelry from Peshawar, my youngest daughter's old blanket, clay pots, red clay pots from Lebanon, my father's dusty books from India, a little packet of playing cards wrapped in the brightest fuchsia tissue paper, which I could never bring myself to unwrap, my mother's string of delicate pearls floating in gold, her gift to me before she died, each in their way embalmed the kernels of my life. It has been a month now since her release. She walks through the house in a kind of bubble, touching her objects. She wanders from room to room, opens every cabinet, every drawer, touches the lace covering her mahogany tables, the transparent porcelain teacups, the carved wooden duck. She opens her old copy of 100 Years of Solitude, the one she bought the year I was born, the one in which I had found a black and white photograph of her and my father kissing. Not a kiss others would have been allowed to witness, not the kind of kiss we had always seen them share. This was a private, phantom kiss, taken by I don't know who, maybe just my father's camera on a tripod. I see her find that lost photograph one morning, watch her breathe out sharply as it falls from the yellowed pages. She is, I think, trying to account for something, I'm not sure what. We've all lost our bearings now that she is back. The guilt I feel for putting that into words. Sometimes language should fail. We've become ghosts again, like we were the first few years she was gone. In the years since, we built small lives with guilt, with regret. Does she see it? Now we are suspended again, unable to work, to speak, to think. My father stumbling, trying to make sense of himself with his wife back. She can't help him yet. He can't help her either. She stepped off the plane with a burlap sack. Inside her sack, blue and white robe, Greek island sandals. To see her walking through the rooms in her blue and white robe, the same sandals, shocks. We can't make it add up. I am not defiant. I might wear my intransigent. I am not defiant. I might wear my intransigence on my sleeve more than before. The thing is to be light as air, I used to say. It's what I wanted my girls to learn, to enter the interstices of life like air, like a shawl through a rose gold ring, to be present and, at the same time, to wander through the alleys of the past, plucking memories and possibilities like grapes off vines. A scarf, a ring, a string of pearls, an alternative to the inexplicable anxiety that would sometimes grip me in the best of times, would have me shaking for hours in the bathroom where Karim would find me, coax me through. Burlap sack, leather sandals, blue and white robe. Not to ground me or to weigh me down, but the opposite, to set me free, to give me the strength to remember that, in the end, we all die. I will die. My husband will die. My beautiful girls, one by one, will die. The thing is to be light as air in the meantime. I see the three of them now, gazelles with wide, fearful eyes. I sense, too, the steel rod running through them, my indelible mark. The objects, to find them in their drawers, cabinets, closets, on tabletops, under beds, is an uncanny delight and a heartbreak. They are more familiar to me than my own body. Seeing them again after a decade means more to me than seeing my family. Sometimes language should fail. I wander through the space that cannot yet feel like home, touching the random oddments that kept me alive. Everything is exactly in its place, like I never left. Who was the dogged monitor of this decade-long precision? Jinan, Rasoon, surely not Karim, his legendary absent-mindedness and impediment, to say the least. Little Yasmin, all of them, in their way, involved in curating this museum of my belongings, as if they knew all along, as if from afar they were trying so heroically to save me. Their lives, like mine, suspended, in spite of marriages and schooling and jobs that pay well. Their broken, damaged lives held together by the painstaking placement of objects that belonged to their lost mother. It takes every speck of my self-discipline not to fall to my knees and wail. The bitterest guilt, a paralyzing regret. To pick up an old book with its dry saffron pages, to see my name and a date inscribed inside the front cover from so many, many years ago, is to know with the certainty of a sharp slap that time has betrayed us. My conjured objects, frozen under a forgiving layer of glass, were safe, forever preserved. But in the heat of life, books and lace yellow, vases and porcelain chip, and shawls, even magical ones from Kashmir, are easily perforated by moths. No going back. From the pages of 100 Years, a phantom kiss. Karim and I on our honeymoon on a houseboat in Kashmir. Beneath our feet, water as blue as the blind eyes of the man who sold us the shawl. It strikes me as tragic that he will never see the tremendous, heart-stopping beauty of his homeland. He laughs as he hands me the shawl, as though mocking my unvoiced pity. Our hunger to see everything in the universe is voracious, and we thank the glittering stars above, so impossibly close we notice, almost near enough to grab, for our eyes, our ears, our noses, our mouths. On a rock as round and smooth as an egg, Kerim and I kiss each other hard, like the world itself depends on it. With our eyes closed and our mouths open, we feel what it means to be young, to believe everything is utterly possible. I hadn't noticed Kerim's tripod at the time and forgot about that kiss until he showed me the photograph of it months, maybe years later. I placed it carefully in the pages of my favorite book, never wanting to forget again, in the whirlwind of children and work and habit, the promise of that kiss. 10 years interned, a litany of objects, but not this photograph. It falls out now, a lifetime later, forgotten thing. In the smoothness of our skin and the white rock under us, I see the old man, his ancient glacier eyes, a promise to love despite war and unrecoverable time, a way home. Thank you.
That was beautiful, May. And uh, just wanted, there's so many things that come to my mind. One thing I wanted to ask, uh, we see, you, there's so many layers of things that we can talk about. But my first question that came to my mind, just thinking about what you read, and what, in your opinion, is resilience? And do you think silence is also a form of resilience? Uh, when you're talking about Zaina's experiences, and being silent or not saying something, or saying nothing happened, um, and not because it's shame. So how do you reflect on this term resilience?
That's a good question, and not easy to answer because I think it's so different for everyone. But I think certainly as a response to trauma, which is definitely what Zaina went through over the course of those 10 years, silence becomes, I think, a way of self-preservation and survival, and so resilience, because whatever you do in order to survive, if it takes being silent about your experiences, then that becomes a matter again of resilience because you're saving yourself. Whereas speaking about it can become maybe an impossibility. You're not going to be able to withstand it. So not everybody is prepared to speak at any given moment, and then silence becomes a kind of reprieve. So I do think that it can go together. I think we live in a world in which expression, it's a kind of Freudian world in which expression, letting everything out, speaking gives you a sense of power and control and so on. And I think that that's an element of that is absolutely true. I do think there's great power in sharing, especially sharing stories and narrating your experiences. I believe that as a writer. But at the same time, in certain moments, sort of a pause, kind of, again, thinking, a consideration, um, can be a form of if not only resistance but resilience, but even resistance, I would say, in the onslaught of everything coming towards you. I mean, I do this again in not in the kind of traumatic experience of Zaina or even her daughter, but I do sometimes need spaces of silence as a way to kind of withstand everything that's going on around and to absorb and almost to sort of hibernate for some time in order to be able to think about slowly how I might want to respond or produce or do things, you know. And again, I think that's sort of contrary to the speed of the world that we live in, where it's everything seems to demand an immediate response. But I do think that there is something of value in silence and momentary pauses and so on. And yes, I think they can constitute a form of resilience.
And on the other hand, can silence, because and not just silence, I read somewhere, there's a quote, truth is in the nuances.